You know how some moments split your life right down the middle? Like there's the before version of you and the after version. This was one of those moments. It was a Tuesday night in October. I'd spent 3 hours making Jay's favorite pot roast, setting the table with the good china his mother gave us, lighting candles, even though it wasn't a special occasion. Just trying to make everything perfect. Again. Jay's sister Laura was over with her boyfriend Mark. My son Liam, barely 10 months old, was finally asleep upstairs after fighting his bedtime for an hour. The house smelled like rosemary and that vanilla candle I always burn when we have company. We were halfway through dinner when Laura started her usual routine. You know the type, the sister-in-law who thinks she's being funny, but there's always that edge underneath. Emily, you're such a mystery woman, she said, cutting into her roast. Always so quiet about your past. I smiled and took another bite. I'd learned not to take the bait, but then she kept going. I mean, we barely know anything about Liam's father. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Jay was chewing slowly, watching me. What do you mean? Mark asked, completely oblivious to the tension that just filled the room. Laura laughed. That fake laugh she does. Well, I'm just saying, maybe Liam isn't Jay's kid after all. Mark laughed too, like it was the funniest joke he'd ever heard. And then Jay, my husband, the man who was supposed to defend me, Jay started laughing. Emily does keep secrets, he said, wiping his mouth with his napkin. Everyone was laughing except me. I sat there, fork still in my hand, watching my husband's face. His eyes weren't laughing. They were studying me, like he was waiting for something. Like maybe he'd been wondering the same thing Laura just said out loud. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time they'd talked about this. This wasn't some random joke over dinner. They'd been discussing my son's paternity behind my back. I set my fork down carefully, pushed back from the table, stood up without saying a word. Emily, Jay called after me as I walked toward the kitchen. Where are you going? I didn't answer. I couldn't trust my voice yet. I stood at the kitchen sink, gripping the edge of the counter, listening to them continue their conversation in the dining room like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just accused me of lying about my own child's father. That's when I knew. It was time. Time to stop pretending their jokes didn't cut deep. Time to stop making excuses for Jay's growing distance. Time to stop hoping they'd eventually accept me into this family. Because the truth was, I had been keeping a secret. Just not the one they thought. Let me back up and tell you how this day really started. Because nothing about that dinner was accidental. I woke up at 6 a.m. even though Liam had kept me up until 2. You know that feeling when you're exhausted but your mind won't stop racing. That was me every single morning for the past 3 years. 3 years. That's how long I'd been married to Jay. 3 years of trying to prove I belonged in his family. 3 years of perfect dinners, thoughtful gifts, and biting my tongue every time his sister made one of her little comments. I stood in my kitchen that morning, staring at the grocery list I'd written the night before. Pot roast, Jay's favorite, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, apple pie from scratch because store-bought wasn't good enough for the Henderson family. I remember thinking, maybe this time will be different. Maybe if I make everything perfect, they'll finally see that I'm not going anywhere. That I'm not some gold digger who trapped their precious Jay with a baby. By noon, I had everything prepped. The roast was seasoning in the fridge. The pie was cooling on the counter. Liam was napping, and I was scrubbing the baseboards because God forbid Laura found a speck of dust anywhere. That's when Jay's Aunt Linda called. Honey, do you mind if I come by a little early? She asked. I wanted to spend some time with that beautiful baby before everyone else gets there. Linda was different from the rest of Jay's family. She actually looked me in the eye when she talked. She remembered my birthday. She brought Liam little gifts for no reason at all. She arrived at 4 carrying a bag of groceries. I brought wine, she said, hugging me at the door. And chocolate. Figured you might need both. I laughed, but something in her voice made me pause. Is everything okay? Linda set her purse down slowly. Emily, can I ask you something? My stomach dropped. Sure. How are things with Jay lately? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could have lied. I could have said everything was fine like I'd been saying for months. But Linda had this way of seeing right through people. He's been distant, I admitted. Ever since Liam was born, actually. I thought it was just new parent stress, but I picked up a dish towel and started folding it just to keep my hands busy. He asks weird questions sometimes about Liam's features, about my past, like he's trying to piece together some puzzle I don't even know exists. Linda nodded slowly. And Laura, I let out a bitter laugh. Laura thinks I'm not good enough for her brother. She's made that crystal clear since day one. What kind of things does she say? Little things, comments about how I never talk about my family, how I'm so private about everything. How convenient it was that I got pregnant right after we started dating. I paused. She acts like I planned it all. Linda's jaw tightened. That girl has never learned when to keep her mouth shut. At 5:30, Laura arrived with Mark. I watched from the kitchen window as they sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes, talking about something that made Laura gesture wildly with her hands. When they finally came inside, Laura's smile was too bright. Emily, something smells amazing in here. She hugged me, but it felt forced. You really went all out tonight. I always do, I said, and immediately regretted how defensive it sounded. Laura raised an eyebrow. Of course you do. Perfect, Emily. Mark headed straight for Jay, who was setting up drinks in the living room. But Laura lingered in the kitchen, watching me check the roast. You know, she said, leaning against the counter. I was talking to my friend Sarah the other day. She works at that clinic downtown. My hand stilled on the oven door. Oh, she mentioned they do paternity tests there. Super quick, super accurate. Just a cheek swab. Laura's voice was casual, but her eyes weren't. Crazy how science works these days, right? I closed the oven door carefully. Why would Sarah be telling you about paternity tests? Laura shrugged. Just came up in conversation. You know how it is. But I knew exactly how it was. Laura didn't have casual conversations about anything. Every word that came out of her mouth had a purpose. From the living room, I could hear Jay and Mark laughing about something. Normal brother-in-law stuff. But when I looked over, I caught Jay glancing toward the kitchen with this expression I couldn't quite read. Linda appeared beside me carrying the salad bowl. Everything ready? She asked, but her eyes were on Laura. Almost, I said. That's when Jay walked in, Liam balanced on his hip. My son was babbling happily, reaching for his father's face with those chubby little hands. He's getting so big, Laura said, but she was studying Liam's features. His nose is so different from yours, Jay. Jay shifted Liam to his other arm. Babies change a lot. True, Laura continued, but some features are just genetics, you know. Like Mark has his dad's exact same nose, had it since birth. The room got quiet. Too quiet. Linda cleared her throat. Should we eat? Everything smells wonderful, Emily. As we moved toward the dining room, I caught Linda's eye. She gave me this look, part sympathy, part warning, like she could see exactly what was coming. And maybe that's when I should have known. Maybe that's when I should have grabbed Liam and left before the bomb went off. But instead, I lit the candles and served the perfect dinner I'd spent all day preparing. Because I still believe somehow that love and effort would be enough to change their minds about me, I need to tell you about the months leading up to that dinner. Because Jay's suspicions didn't start that night. They'd been building like a slow poison drop by drop until they infected everything we touched. It started when Liam was about 6 months old. We were at the pediatrician's office for his regular checkup, and Dr. Martinez was doing that thing doctors do, commenting on how babies look. He's got such distinctive features, she said, measuring Liam's head. That sharp little nose is going to be quite handsome when he grows up. On the drive home, Jay was quiet. Too quiet. Finally, he said, His nose really is sharp, isn't it? I glanced in the rearview mirror at Liam in his car seat. I guess. He's still a baby Jay. Features change. Mine was always round, even as a kid. Jay touched his own nose absently. Laura's too. We both got Dad's nose. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it away. He probably got mine. Jay looked at me sideways. Yours isn't sharp either. That was the first crack, small enough that I convinced myself I was imagining it. But then came the photographs. Jay started taking pictures of Liam constantly, which should have been sweet, right, proud new father documenting every moment. Except Jay wasn't just taking pictures. He was studying them, comparing them to old photos of himself as a baby. I'd find him at the kitchen table at night, scrolling through his phone with this intense concentration that made my skin crawl. "What are you looking at?" I asked one evening. He quickly minimized whatever he was viewing. "Just baby pictures, trying to see who he looks like." And Jay shrugged, but his shoulders were tense. "Hard to tell, babies all kind of look the same." But that wasn't what his face was saying. His face was saying something entirely different. The comments started getting more frequent, more pointed. "He doesn't smile like me," Jay said one morning while feeding Liam breakfast. "Watch how he scrunches up his whole face. I've never done that. Look how long his fingers are," he mentioned another day. "Mine are stubby. Yours are normal. Where'd he get those piano fingers?" Each observation felt like a tiny needle prick. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they were slowly bleeding me dry. The worst part was I started looking too. I'd catch myself staring at my son, trying to see what Jay was seeing, searching for resemblances that should have been obvious, should have been natural. But when you're looking for doubt, you'll find it everywhere. Then came the night I heard him talking to Laura. It was a Thursday in September. I'd gone to bed early with a headache, leaving Jay downstairs watching some action movie. I was just drifting off when I heard his voice low and urgent. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. "I'm probably overthinking it," Jay was saying. "Are you, though?" Laura's voice was sharp, encouraging. "Jay, you have every right to know for sure. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid? And what if you're not? What if she's been lying to you this whole time?" My heart stopped. "She's not that type of person," Jay said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "How well do you really know her? Jay, you guys moved fast, really fast. She got pregnant after, 3 months of dating?" 4 months. 4 months, and you proposed as soon as she told you she was pregnant. Some women would see that as an opportunity. I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. "She's not like that," Jay repeated, but weaker this time. "I'm just saying maybe you should find out for sure. For your own peace of mind. There are tests, simple ones." "I can't just ask for a paternity test, Laura. That would destroy everything." "Would it though, or would it give you the truth you deserve?" I heard Jay sigh heavily. "I don't know what to do. Sleep on it. But Jay, you have the right to know if Liam is really your son." I backed away from the stairs as quietly as I could and slipped back into bed. When Jay came up 20 minutes later, I pretended to be asleep, but I lay there for hours staring at the ceiling, feeling my world shift on its axis. That conversation changed something fundamental between us. Jay started watching me differently, looking for signs of deception in every word I spoke. Every time I was quiet, he'd ask what I was thinking. Every time I left the house, he'd want to know where I was going. The man who used to trust me completely suddenly couldn't trust me with anything. And I started doubting everything too. Not about Liam's paternity. I knew the truth about that. But about my marriage. About whether Jay had ever really loved me or if he'd just married me out of obligation. Had I trapped him? Had he always wondered? Or was Laura poisoning his mind bit by bit? The worst part was the silence. Jay stopped talking to me about his concerns. Instead, he'd just watch. Study me when he thought I wasn't looking. Question things that used to be normal. "Who was that on the phone?" he'd ask when I hung up from talking to my doctor. "Where did you go today?" when I came back from grocery shopping. "What were you like before we met?" Late at night, in bed, like he was searching for clues to some mystery I didn't even know existed. I started feeling like a suspect in my own marriage. The breaking point came 2 weeks before that dinner. I was giving Liam a bath when Jay walked into the bathroom and just stood there watching us. What? I asked. He really doesn't look like me, does he? I looked down at my son splashing happily in the warm water. His dark hair was plastered to his head, his cheeks pink from the steam. He was perfect. He was beautiful. He was Jay's son. He looks like himself, I said carefully. That's not what I mean, Emily. The way he said my name made my blood run cold, like it tasted bitter in his mouth. Then what do you mean, Jay? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, nothing. Forget I said anything. But you can't unsay something like that. You can't take back doubt once it's been spoken out loud. That night, after Jay fell asleep, I went into Liam's room and stood over his crib. I traced his tiny features with my eyes, memorizing every detail. His sharp little nose, his long fingers, his serious expression, even in sleep. And I realized something that terrified me. It didn't matter if Liam looked like Jay or not. It didn't matter what any test said. What mattered was that my husband, the man who was supposed to love and protect our family, was ready to believe I was capable of the worst kind of betrayal. He was ready to believe I would lie about something that fundamental, that's sacred. That's when I knew our marriage was already over. The dinner with Laura was just the final nail in the coffin. But Jay didn't know something that was about to make all his doubts look very, very foolish. Because I had been keeping a secret, just not the one he thought. The morning after I heard Jay and Laura talking, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to get a paternity test. Not because I had any doubt about Liam's father, but because I was tired of living under a cloud of suspicion. Tired of feeling like I had to prove my innocence every single day. If Jay wanted the truth, I'd give him the truth. And then we'd see what he did with it. I waited until Jay left for work, and Liam went down for his morning nap. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started researching DNA testing labs. I didn't want to go anywhere local, couldn't risk running into someone who knew Jay's family. I found a place called Precision Genetics about 40 minutes outside of town. 5-star reviews, accredited, confidential, perfect. I called during Liam's nap. Precision Genetics, this is Maria. How can I help you? Hi, I need to schedule a paternity test. Of course. Are both parties able to come in together? My stomach tightened. Actually, I'd prefer to do this without the father knowing. Is that possible? There was a pause. We do offer discrete testing options. You'd need to provide samples for both the child and the alleged father. Hair samples work, or saliva samples if you can collect them without contamination. How much? For our standard paternity test with discrete sample collection, it's $450. Results in 5 to 7 business days. $450. Money, Jay would definitely notice if I took it from our joint account, but I had a small savings account from before we got married. Money I'd never touched. I'd like to schedule an appointment. Wonderful. When would work for you? I looked at my calendar. Tomorrow morning, early as possible. We have a 9 a.m. opening. Would that work? Perfect. The hardest part was going to be collecting the samples without Jay knowing. I spent the rest of that day planning it out like some kind of mission. For Liam, it would be easy. He was always pulling at his hair, leaving little strands on his pillow, his high chair everywhere. I'd just need to collect some that definitely came from him. Jay would be trickier. But I had an idea. That night after Jay fell asleep, I lay in bed listening to his breathing. Deep and even. He'd always been a heavy sleeper. At 5 a.m., I slipped out of bed as quietly as possible. Jay didn't even stir. I crept into the bathroom and opened his side of the medicine cabinet. There it was, his electric toothbrush sitting in its charging dock. He'd used it just 8 hours earlier. My hands were shaking as I carefully removed the brush head and placed it in a small plastic bag I'd hidden behind my face wash. The bristles would have his saliva, his DNA. I replaced it with an identical brush head I'd ordered online the day before. Jay would never know the difference. Next, I went to Liam's room. He was sleeping on his stomach, his little fist curled near his face. I gathered the hair strands from his pillow, making sure to get ones with the root attached like the lab had instructed. By 5:30, I had both samples sealed in separate bags, labeled carefully, and hidden in my purse. The drive to precision genetics felt like the longest 40 minutes of my life. I kept checking my rearview mirror, paranoid that somehow Jay would figure out where I was going and follow me. The lab was in a small medical complex wedged between a dermatologist's office and a physical therapy clinic. Discreet, professional, exactly what I needed. Dr. Maria Alvarez was the technician who met with me. She was probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and steady hands, the kind of person who'd seen every family secret imaginable and learned not to judge. "So, you're looking for paternity confirmation," she said, reviewing my paperwork. "Yes. My husband has been expressing doubts, and I want to settle this once and for all," she nodded. "And he doesn't know you're doing this." "No, I want to have the results before I tell him anything." Dr. Alvarez leaned back in her chair and studied me for a moment. "Can I ask you something, Emily?" "Sure." "How certain are you of the result?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you prepared for any outcome? Because in my experience, people think they want the truth, but truth changes things. Sometimes permanently." I thought about Jay's face at dinner the night before. The way he'd studied Liam like he was solving a puzzle. The whispered conversations with his sister. The growing distance between us. "Then let it," I said. Dr. Alvarez smiled slightly. "Fair enough. Let's see what you brought me." I handed over the samples, watching as she examined them under a magnifying glass. "These look good. Plenty of genetic material to work with. The toothbrush was smart. Saliva samples are very reliable." "How long for results?" 5 business days. We'll call you with preliminary results, then mail the official report to whatever address you specify." I gave her my maiden name and my sister's address in the next town over. One more secret to add to the pile. "One more thing," Dr. Alvarez said as I stood to leave. "When you get these results, think carefully about how you want to handle them. DNA doesn't lie, but people's reactions to DNA can be complicated. Meaning sometimes proving you're right doesn't feel as good as you think it will." I thanked her and left. But her words stayed with me during the drive home. The next 5 days were torture. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. Every time Jay looked at me suspiciously, I wondered if he somehow knew what I'd done. But Jay didn't know anything. He just kept up his routine of subtle questioning and careful observation, like he was building a case against me, one small piece of evidence at a time. On the 5th day, I was folding laundry in the bedroom when my phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Emily, this is Dr. Alvarez from Precision Genetics." My hands went numb. "Yes." "I have your results. Are you somewhere private where we can talk?" "Yes." "Tell me." "The test confirms paternity with 99.99% certainty. The alleged father is indeed the biological father." I sank onto the bed, relief flooding through me, so fast it made me dizzy. "Thank you," I whispered. "Emily, are you all right?" "I'm fine, just relieved. The official report will be mailed today. You should have it by Friday." After I hung up, I sat in my bedroom for a long time, just breathing. 99.99%. Jay was Liam's father. I had proof. Official, scientific, undeniable proof. But Dr. Alvarez was right about one thing. Having the truth didn't feel as satisfying as I'd expected, because the real problem wasn't whether Jay was Liam's father. The real problem was that Jay had been willing to believe he wasn't, that he'd been willing to believe I was capable of that level of deception. The report arrived on Friday, sealed in an official envelope with the lab's letterhead. I held it in my hands for a full minute before opening it, even though I already knew what it said. There it was in black and white. Scientific certainty. Undeniable proof. I folded the report carefully and put it in my jewelry box, next to my grandmother's ring and the earrings Jay had given me for our first anniversary. I wasn't sure when I'd use it, but I knew I would. Because Jay's doubts weren't going to just disappear on their own. If anything, they were getting worse. And I was done being the victim of his suspicions. The next time Jay questioned Liam's paternity, I'd be ready. The next time Laura made her little comments, I'd have ammunition. I just had to wait for the right moment, and as it turned out, I didn't have to wait very long. After I got that phone call confirming the results, I realized I needed to be strategic about this. Having the truth was one thing. Having it in a way that couldn't be questioned, destroyed, or dismissed was another thing entirely. I drove back to Precision Genetics the next Monday and requested 3 additional copies of the official report. Dr. Alvarez didn't ask why I needed so many. She just processed my request and handed me 4 identical envelopes, each one containing the same undeniable truth. Probability of paternity 99.99%. 4 simple words that would either save my marriage or end it. On Tuesday morning, after Jay left for work, I took the first copy to our bank. I'd opened a safety deposit box years ago for important documents like our marriage certificate and insurance policies. Jay knew about it, but he never bothered with that kind of thing. Said it was too much hassle for stuff we'd probably never need. I slipped the DNA report into a manila folder labeled legal documents and locked it away. Safe, permanent, untouchable. The second copy went to my lawyer. I know how that sounds, like I was planning to divorce Jay, but the truth was simpler and more complicated than that. I'd learned something important over the past few months. Trust once broken doesn't heal itself. And if Jay could doubt something as fundamental as Liam's paternity, what else might he doubt in the future? I needed to protect myself, protect my son. Sarah Mitchell had handled the legal work when Jay and I bought our house. She was sharp, discreet, and she understood family dynamics better than most therapists I'd met. "Emily," she said when I called her office, "what can I do for you? I need to document something for potential future use." "What kind of documentation?" I explained the situation carefully without going into too much emotional detail. Sarah listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. "You want to establish a paper trail," she said when I finished. "Exactly. Smart thinking. Bring me whatever you have and I'll file it with your other personal documents. Completely confidential unless you specifically instruct me otherwise." That afternoon, I dropped off the second copy of the paternity test, along with a written statement describing Jay's behavior over the past several months. The dates, the conversations, the growing hostility. Sarah sealed everything in an envelope marked with the current date and my instructions, to be opened only upon my written request, or in the event of legal proceedings involving my marriage. "This gives you options," she explained. "If things get better, you never have to use any of this. If they get worse, you have documented proof of what really happened." The third copy I kept at home, but not where Jay might accidentally find it. I'd learned to be careful about hiding things. Too careful, probably. I waited until Saturday when Jay took Liam to the park. Then I went into our bedroom and opened my jewelry box. It was a wedding gift from Jay's mother, one of the few genuinely thoughtful things she'd ever given me. Mahogany wood with a blue velvet interior and a secret compartment at the bottom. I'd discovered the hidden compartment by accident a few months after we got married. The perfect place for the things that mattered most. My grandmother's ring, the love letter Jay wrote me when we were dating, a lock of Liam's hair from his first haircut, and now a DNA test that proved everything I'd been trying to tell them. I folded the report carefully and slipped it into the secret compartment next to the letter from Jay. The irony wasn't lost on me, the proof of his love and the proof of his doubt lying side by side in the dark. The fourth copy I kept in my purse, and just in case. I didn't need it that day, but I would. For the next few weeks, I carried that envelope everywhere. To the grocery store, to Liam's doctor appointments, to dinner at Jay's parents' house where his mother made another comment about how Liam didn't look like anyone in their family. Each time someone questioned my son's features, I felt the weight of that envelope in my purse. Each time Jay studied Liam with that calculating expression, I knew I had the power to end his doubts forever. But I also knew that using that power would change everything between us. Because pulling out a DNA test wasn't just about proving paternity. It was about proving that I'd been driven to such desperate measures by my own husband's lack of trust. It was proof that our marriage had already failed in the most fundamental way possible. So I waited. I carried that envelope like a loaded gun, hoping I'd never have to use it, but knowing it was there if I needed it. I went through the motions of being a happy wife and mother. And I made dinners and attended family gatherings and pretended that Jay's suspicious glances didn't cut me to the bone. But every night when I put my purse on the dresser, I felt that envelope inside, waiting. And every morning when I picked up my purse again, I wondered if today would be the day I'd finally have to use it. The answer came sooner than I expected, because Jay and Laura weren't done with their little campaign. If anything, they were just getting started. And the next time they decided to publicly question my integrity, I'd be ready for them. So there I was, standing at the kitchen sink, gripping the counter while my husband and his sister laughed about whether my son was actually his. I could hear them in the dining room, their conversation continuing like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just accused me of the most devastating betrayal a wife could commit. "She's probably just overwhelmed," Mark was saying. "New moms get emotional." "Emily's always been dramatic," Laura added. "Remember at the wedding when she cried during the toast? Who does that?" Aunt Linda's voice cut through their chatter. "That's enough." "Oh, come on, Linda," Laura continued. "We're just having a conversation." "No," Linda said firmly. "You're being cruel, and you're being foolish." I heard chairs scraping against the floor. Footsteps. Jay's voice getting closer to the kitchen. "Emily, honey, come back. Laura was just joking around." Just joking around. As if questioning your nephew's paternity was some kind of party game. I turned around slowly. Jay was standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable, but not apologetic. Behind him, I could see Laura watching from the dining room with this satisfied expression on her face. "Was she," I asked quietly, "was she what, joking around? Because it didn't sound like a joke to me, Jay." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "You know how Laura is. She doesn't think before she speaks." "And you? Do you think before you speak?" Jay's jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Emily does keep secrets, that's what you said. In front of your family, about your wife, about the mother of your child." "I didn't mean anything by it. Didn't you?" The kitchen went quiet, except for the soft bubbling of the pot roast in the oven. Jay was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Or maybe like he was finally seeing what he'd been looking for all along. "We should go back and finish dinner," he said finally. "Should we?" I walked past him toward the dining room, but instead of sitting down, I kept walking. Past the table where everyone was watching me with varying degrees of discomfort. Past Laura, who had the nerve to look surprised. Past Aunt Linda, who was watching everything with sharp, calculating eyes. I went straight to my purse. The envelope was right where I'd left it, nestled between my wallet and my car keys. I could feel the weight of it in my hands. Months of doubt, weeks of planning, one moment of truth. When I walked back into the dining room, the conversation stopped completely. "Emily," Jay asked, "what are you doing?" I set the envelope on the table right next to the beautiful centerpiece I'd spent an hour arranging that morning. Right in front of Jay's plate. "Since we're sharing secrets tonight," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I thought you might want to open this." Jay stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What is it?" "Open it." "Emily, I don't understand what's open it." Laura leaned forward in her chair. "What's in the envelope, Emily?" I didn't take my eyes off Jay. "Why don't you tell her, honey? You're the one who's been wondering about Liam's paternity for months. You're the one who's been whispering with your sister about DNA tests. You're the one who thinks I trapped you with another man's baby." The color drained from Jay's face. "Emily, I never said—" "Open the envelope, Jay." Mark cleared his throat. "Maybe we should go. This seems like a private—" "No." I held up my hand without looking at him. "Stay, please. I think everyone here needs to see this." Aunt Linda was sitting perfectly still, her eyes moving between Jay and me like she was watching a chess match. Jay picked up the envelope with shaking hands. His name was written on the front in my careful handwriting along with the date. He turned it over, broke the seal, and pulled out the papers inside. I watched his face as he read. Watched the confusion turn to recognition. Watched the recognition turn to something that might have been shame. The paper was shaking in his hands. "What does it say, Jay?" Laura asked, but her voice had lost its edge. Jay's mouth opened and closed like he was trying to form words that wouldn't come. "Read it out loud," I said. "Emily, please." "Read it." Jay's voice was barely a whisper. "DNA paternity test results. Precision Genetics Laboratory." Louder. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Test subjects Liam James Henderson, age 10 months. J. Michael Henderson, age 31. Alleged father." Laura was leaning so far forward she was practically falling out of her chair. "And," I prompted. Jay's voice cracked. "Probability of paternity, 99.99%. J. Michael Henderson is confirmed to be the biological father of Liam James Henderson." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. The soft hum of the refrigerator. My own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Laura's mouth was hanging open. Mark was staring at his plate like he wished he could disappear into it. Aunt Linda's eyes had narrowed to sharp points, and she was looking at Jay like she'd never seen him before. "When did you—" Jay started, then stopped. When did I get tired of being accused of cheating on you? When did I decide to prove what I should never have had to prove in the first place?" I reached across the table and took the papers from his hands. They were damp with his sweat. 3 weeks ago," I continued, "I went to a lab 40 minutes outside of town. I collected hair samples from Liam's pillow and saliva samples from your toothbrush. I paid $450 of my own money to prove that I'm not the liar you think I am." Jay was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Emily, I'm sorry. You never meant, what, to doubt me, to question whether I was capable of that level of deception. To discuss my supposed betrayal with your sister behind my back." Laura finally found her voice. "Now, wait just a minute." "No." I turned to face her, and something in my expression must have stopped her cold. "You wait. You've spent months dropping hints about my character, making jokes about my son's paternity, planting seeds of doubt in your brother's mind. Well, congratulations, Laura. You got exactly what you wanted. You were just, looking out for your brother, protecting the family. Or were you just trying to prove that the woman Jay married wasn't good enough for him?" Aunt Linda spoke for the first time since I'd sat down. "That's enough questions for one night." Everyone turned to look at her. She was sitting perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap, but there was steel in her voice. "The only question that matters now," Linda continued, "is what you're going to do about this, Jay." Jay looked around the table like he was hoping someone would rescue him, but nobody was coming to his aid. Not this time. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "How about I'm sorry," Linda suggested. "How about I was wrong? How about my wife deserved better than this?" Jay's eyes filled with tears. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I don't know why Yes, you do." I folded the DNA results carefully and put them back in the envelope. "You know exactly why. Because you never trusted me in the first place. Because some part of you always believed I was too good to be true. Because your sister convinced you that I was playing some kind of long game." I stood up from the table, the envelope clutched in my hand. "Where are you going?" Jay asked. "Away. I need time to think." "Emily, please don't leave. We can work through this." I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. At the man who had promised to love and honor me, who had vowed to trust me above all others, who had spent months believing I was capable of the worst kind of betrayal. "Can we, Jay? Can we really work through the fact that you thought so little of me? That you were ready to believe I would lie about something this fundamental?" "I was confused. I was scared. I didn't know what to think." "You should have thought about your wife. You should have thought about the woman who loved you enough to marry you after 4 months, who moved away from her family to be with yours, who spent 3 years trying to prove she belonged here." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. the most heartbreaking part isn't that you doubted Liam's paternity. It's that you doubted mine. You doubted whether I was the kind of person who could do something like that. And the answer is no, Jay. I'm not. I never was. But apparently, you needed scientific proof to believe it. I left them sitting there in the dining room surrounded by the ruins of the perfect dinner I'd spent all day preparing. But for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. I felt free. I should have kept walking, should have grabbed my keys and left them all sitting there with the wreckage of their assumptions. But something made me stop at the doorway and turn back. Maybe it was the look on Jay's face. Maybe it was the way Laura was already reaching across the table, trying to get her hands on those test results, like she could somehow make them disappear. Don't! My voice cut through the air like a blade. Laura's hand froze halfway to the envelope. Don't touch it. I walked back to the table and slammed my palm down on top of the DNA results, the sound echoing through the dining room like a gunshot. Let your brother explain what he's accused me of for months, I said, looking directly at Laura. Let him tell you about all those late-night conversations you two have been having, about the doubts he's been sharing, about the theories you've been feeding him. Laura's face went white. Emily, You never what? Never suggested he get a paternity test. Never made comments about how convenient my pregnancy was. Never questioned whether Liam really looks like Jay. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I kept my focus on Laura. She was shrinking back in her chair like she wanted to disappear. I heard you, I continued, that night in September. You told Jay he had every right to know for sure. You told him some women would see a quick proposal as an opportunity. You planted those seeds of doubt, and then you watered them every chance you got. Jay was still staring at the test results, like they were written in a language he couldn't understand. The paper was literally shaking in his hands. Is that true? Aunt Linda asked, her voice deadly quiet. Jay looked up at his aunt, then at Laura, then back at the papers. He was just, what? Linda pressed. Confused, Jay whispered. Liam doesn't look like me. And Emily never talks about her past, and everything happened so fast. So you decided she was lying to you. I didn't decide anything. I had questions. Uncle Tom, who had been silent through this entire ordeal, finally spoke up. His voice was soft, but it carried weight. Jay, explain. 2 words. That's all it took to reduce my husband to a stammering mess. I don't know how to explain it, Jay said, setting the DNA results down like they were on fire. I love Emily, I love Liam, but Laura kept pointing things out and I started noticing things and you just what Tom asked. I got scared. The honesty of it hit the room like a physical blow. Jay wasn't trying to justify his behavior or make excuses. He was just admitting the truth. He'd been scared. Scared of what? Linda asked. Scared that it was too good to be true. Scared that someone like Emily would never actually choose someone like me unless there was a reason. Scared that maybe I was being played. I felt something crack inside my chest. Because there it was, the real truth. Jay hadn't doubted me because of anything I'd done. He'd doubted me because he didn't believe he deserved me. So you decided to what? I asked. Test me. Put me on trial in my own marriage. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? Jay, how long were you planning to watch me like I was some kind of criminal? How many more family dinners were you going to let Laura make her little comments? How many more nights were you going to lie in bed next to me wondering if I was lying about everything? Jay's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. Sometimes truth speaks loudest in stillness, and the silence that followed Jay's admission was deafening. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped ticking. Linda was the first to break the quiet. This is disgraceful. Her voice was cold as winter. I'd never heard Aunt Linda speak that way before. She was usually warm, diplomatic, the family peacekeeper. But there was nothing warm about her now. Linda, Laura started. I wasn't talking to you. Linda's eyes were fixed on Jay. Though your behavior hasn't been much better. Laura's mouth snapped shut. 31 years old, Linda continued, still looking at Jay. Married, a father, and you let your sister convince you that your wife was capable of fraud. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Laura decided to play detective with Emily's life. It looks like you two sat around making up conspiracy theories about a woman who has done nothing but love you and try to fit into this family. Tom nodded slowly. Linda's right. Even Mark was staring at Jay like he'd never seen him before. Dude, this is messed up. I know, Jay whispered. I know it's messed up. But I didn't know how to stop it. Once the doubts started, they just kept growing. Did you ever think about talking to Emily? Linda asked. Did you ever think about having an honest conversation with your wife, instead of going behind her back? Jay looked at me across the table. I was afraid. Of what? Of the answer. If I asked her directly and she said yes, Liam is mine, I'd have to believe her. And if I couldn't believe her, then our marriage was over. I stared at my husband, trying to process what he'd just said. So instead, you decided to believe the worst about me without ever giving me a chance to defend myself. I didn't decide to believe anything. I just couldn't stop wondering. You could have stopped Jay. You chose not to. You chose to listen to Laura's poison instead of trusting your wife. You chose to analyze our son like he was evidence in a crime, instead of celebrating him as our child. Laura finally found her voice again. I was just looking out for my brother. I turned to face her and she actually flinched. No, you weren't. You were looking for ways to prove I wasn't good enough for him. You've been doing it since the day we met. The comments about my background, the jokes about how fast everything happened, the way you always make me feel like an outsider at family events. That's not true. Isn't it? Name one time, Laura. One time in 3 years that you've treated me like I actually belong in this family? Laura opened and closed her mouth, but no words came out. That's what I thought. Tom cleared his throat. Emily, what do you want to happen now? The question caught me off guard. What did I want to happen? I'd been so focused on proving my innocence that I hadn't thought about what came after. I don't know, I said honestly. I just know I can't pretend this never happened. I can't go back to walking on eggshells trying to prove I'm worthy of basic trust from my own husband. That's fair, Linda said. Jay, what are you going to do about this? Jay looked around the table at all the faces staring at him. His family, people who had watched him grow up, who knew him better than anyone, and not one of them was coming to his defense. I don't know where to start, he said finally. How about with an apology, Tom suggested. A real one, not some half-hearted I'm sorry you're upset nonsense. Jay took a shaky breath. Emily, I am so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I let Laura's comments get in my head. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove something you should never have had to prove. It was a start. But it wasn't enough. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. Everyone looked surprised. I'm sorry I married someone who thought so little of me. I'm sorry I spent 3 years trying to earn love I thought I already had. And I'm sorry our son is going to grow up knowing his father once questioned whether he was really his. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jay looked like I'd physically struck him. Emily, please. Can we try to work through this? I picked up the DNA results and folded them carefully. I don't know, Jay. Can we work through the fact that you were ready to believe I was capable of the worst kind of betrayal? Can we work through the fact that you trusted your sister's gossip more than your wife's word? I want to try. Do you? Or do you just want things to go back to the way they were, before I called your bluff? Jay didn't have an answer for that, and his silence told me everything I needed to know. I was done being the only one fighting for our marriage. I left them sitting there in stunned silence and went upstairs to pack. Not everything, just enough for a few days. Some clothes for me and Liam, his favorite stuffed elephant. The basics we'd need while I figured out what came next. I moved through our bedroom like I was in a trance, pulling items from drawers and folding them carefully into my old travel suitcase. The same suitcase I'd brought when I first moved in with Jay 3 years ago, back when I thought we were building something permanent together. Liam was still sleeping soundly in his crib, 10 months old and completely oblivious to the fact that his parents' marriage had just imploded over dinner. I packed his diaper bag, slowly trying not to wake him. He'd need bottles for tonight, a change of clothes for tomorrow, his sleep blanket that smelled like home. I was zipping up my suitcase when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, familiar footsteps that I'd been listening to for 3 years. Jay appeared in the doorway, his face red and blotchy like he'd been crying. "What are you doing?" I didn't look up. "Packing." "Emily, please, don't do this. Don't protect myself and my son from more of your family's accusations. It won't happen again. I swear, Laura is never going to say another word about any of this." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think this is about Laura, isn't it?" I finally looked at him. Really looked at him. Jay was standing in our bedroom doorway like a stranger, like someone I used to know but couldn't quite place. "This is about you, Jay. This is about the fact that you believed her. This is about the fact that for months you looked at our son and wondered if he was really yours. This is about the fact that you looked at me and wondered if I was really who I said I was. I was confused. You were cruel." The word hung between us like a physical barrier. Jay took a step into the room, but I held up my hand. "Don't. Emily, I love you. I love Liam. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Can you just turn off the doubt? Can you promise me you'll never look at Liam again and wonder about his features? Can you promise me you'll never question whether I'm telling you the truth about something?" Jay's silence was answer enough. I picked up the suitcase in my purse. "I need to get Liam." "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet. A hotel, my sister's place. Somewhere that feels safe." "This is your home, Emily. You shouldn't have to leave." I stopped at the bedroom door and turned back to face him. "You're right. I shouldn't have to leave. But I also shouldn't have to live with someone who thinks I'm capable of that level of deception. So here we are." "How long?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know." "Emily, please. I'm begging you. Don't take Liam away from me." "I'm not taking him away from you, Jay. I'm taking him away from this situation. There's a difference." I went into Liam's room and gently lifted him from his crib. He stirred but didn't wake, just settled against my shoulder with a soft sigh. I grabbed his diaper bag and his car seat. Jay followed me downstairs, his footsteps echoing through the house. "I can change," he said as I loaded Liam into his car seat. "I can be better. I can learn to trust you the way I should have from the beginning." "Maybe you can, but I can't unlearn what I know now." Which is what, I straightened up and looked at my husband, that when things got difficult, when doubt crept in, you didn't turn to me. You turned against me. You didn't give me the benefit of the doubt. You gave that to everyone else instead. "I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo months of suspicion. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you discussed our private marriage with your sister behind my back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you were prepared to believe the worst about me." I was reaching for my car keys when there was a knock at the front door. Jay and I looked at each other. It was almost 9 o'clock. Who would be coming by this late? Jay opened the door to find Aunt Linda standing on our porch, her purse clutched in her hands and a determined expression on her face. "Linda, what are you doing here?" She looked past Jay to where I was standing with Liam's car seat. "I came to talk to Emily." "Linda, this isn't really a good time." "It's exactly the right time." She stepped around Jay and walked directly to me. "Emily, honey, can we talk for a minute?" I glanced at Jay, then back at Linda. "I was just leaving." "I know, that's why I'm here." She set her purse down on the hall table and looked at me with those sharp, understanding eyes. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," she said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. For 3 years, I'd been trying to prove myself to this family, trying to earn my place, trying to show them I belonged. And all that time, I thought I was fighting by myself. Linda, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have told Laura to keep her mouth shut months ago. I should have told Jay he was being an idiot for listening to her. I should have supported you instead of staying silent. Jay was standing behind us, listening to every word. You couldn't have known. Yes, I could have. I saw what was happening. I saw the way Laura treated you. I saw the way Jay started looking at you and Liam, and I chose to stay out of it because I thought it wasn't my place to interfere. Linda reached out and touched my arm gently. But I was wrong. When someone is being treated unfairly, it is my place to speak up. It's everyone's place to speak up. And I failed you. I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes. Linda, you don't need to. Yes, I do. And more than that, I need to ask you something. Would you consider staying with me for a few days? Just until you figure out what you want to do next? I looked at her in surprise. You'd want us to stay with you. Emily, you're family. You've been family since the day Jay brought you home. And if my nephew is too foolish to see what a gift that is, then he doesn't deserve to have you under the same roof until he figures it out. From behind us, Jay made a sound like he'd been punched. I'm not leaving forever, I said, looking back at him. But I am showing you that I can. I'm showing you that I don't need to stay somewhere I'm not trusted. I don't need to keep fighting for a place in a family that's not sure they want me in it. Emily, please. You want to fix this, Jay? Then fix it. Figure out why you were so ready to believe the worst about me. Figure out how to trust the woman you married. Figure out how to be the kind of husband and father your family deserves. I picked up Liam's car seat and looked at Linda. Thank you for the offer and for being here. Of course, honey. Follow me to my place. We'll get you and this beautiful boy settled in. As I walked toward the door, Jay called out one more time. Emily, I love you. I stopped but didn't turn around. I know you do, Jay, but love without trust is just words, and I'm tired of words. I loaded Liam into my car and followed Linda's taillights into the night, leaving behind the house I'd tried so hard to make into a home. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Linda's guest room was painted a soft yellow with white trim, peaceful, quiet. Nothing like the tension that had been suffocating me at home for months. She helped me set up Liam's portable crib by the window where he could see the morning light, made sure I had everything I needed. Extra towels, a space heater in case the room got cold, a baby monitor so I could hear Liam from anywhere in the house. Take all the time you need, she said, squeezing my shoulder. Both of you are welcome here as long as you want to stay. That first night, I barely slept. Not because I was uncomfortable, but because my mind was racing. For the first time in months, I felt safe enough to actually think clearly about what had happened to my marriage. The next morning, while Liam napped, I sat at Linda's kitchen table with my laptop and started making changes. I changed the password on my personal email account, changed the password on my savings account, called my bank and added additional security questions. It wasn't that I thought Jay would try to access my accounts maliciously, but I needed to feel like I had control over something, like I had my own space that couldn't be invaded or questioned. Then I called my lawyer. Sarah, it's Emily Henderson. I need to add something to my files. Of course. What's going on? I told her about the dinner, about the DNA test, about everything that had been building up over the past few months. I want to document all of this while it's fresh, I said, in case I need it later. Smart thinking. Are you considering divorce? The question hung in the air. 3 days ago, I would have said no automatically. But now, I don't know. I need time to figure out if this marriage can be saved. Or if it's worth saving. Understandable. I'll prepare a detailed timeline of events and add it to your files. If you decide to proceed with separation or divorce proceedings, we'll have everything documented. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I logged into our shared computer to grab some work files I needed. That's when I found them. Jay's email history was still open in another tab, and there, buried in his search history from 6 months ago, were the searches that confirmed everything I'd suspected. DNA paternity testing near me. How accurate are paternity tests? Can you do paternity test without mother knowing? At home, DNA test reliability. The timestamp showed he'd been researching this stuff back in April, 2 months before Laura ever made her first comment about Liam's features. 2 months before I overheard them talking about it. This hadn't started with Laura's influence. It had started with Jay's own doubts. I scrolled through more of his search history, my stomach sinking with each entry. Signs baby, not yours. Baby doesn't look like father genetics. What to do if you think wife cheated? There were dozens of searches, dozens of websites visited, forums where men discussed their suspicions about their children's paternity, articles about women who had lied about their babies' fathers. He'd been researching this for months, building a case against me in his own mind, piece by piece, search by search. But here's what really broke my heart. In between all those searches about DNA tests and paternity doubts, there were other searches. How to trust your wife again. Marriage counseling near me. Signs of a faithful wife. How to overcome jealousy in marriage. Jay had known his doubts were wrong. He'd been looking for ways to fix them, to trust me, to save our marriage. But instead of talking to me, instead of getting professional help, he'd let Laura's poison take root. I found one email that particularly gutted me. It was a draft he'd never sent, addressed to a marriage counselor. My wife had a baby 10 months ago, and I'm starting to have doubts about whether he's mine. I love them both, but I can't shake this feeling that something isn't right. She got pregnant very quickly after we started dating, and she's very private about her past. I don't want to destroy my marriage by asking for a paternity test, but I also can't live with these doubts. What should I do? He'd written that email 3 months ago. 3 months of having the right instinct to get help but never following through. 3 months of choosing to suffer in silence instead of fighting for our relationship. 3 months of choosing doubt over trust. I closed the laptop and sat in Linda's quiet kitchen, feeling something settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, something closer to clarity. Jay hadn't just doubted Liam's paternity. He doubted me from the very beginning. Maybe not consciously, but the seeds were there from day one. The feeling that I was too good to be true. That someone like me wouldn't choose someone like him unless there was an ulterior motive. All of Laura's comments had done was give voice to doubts he'd already been harboring. And that changed everything, because it meant this wasn't just about one conversation or one moment of weakness. This was about the foundation of our entire relationship, about whether Jay had ever really trusted me at all. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jay. "Please come home. I miss you. Liam needs his dad." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Liam's dad can visit him here anytime, but I'm not coming home until I figure out if I still have a husband worth coming home to. I hit send and then turned off my phone. Linda found me an hour later, still sitting at her kitchen table, staring out the window at her garden. "You okay, honey?" "I found his search history," I said quietly. She sat down across from me. "And he's been doubting me since April, before Laura ever said anything, before any of this came to a head. He's been questioning whether Liam is his for 6 months." Linda sighed heavily. "I was afraid of that." "You knew?" "I suspected. Jay's always been insecure. Even as a kid, he never believed good things could happen to him without there being a catch." "But I'm not a catch, Linda. I'm just a woman who fell in love with her husband, who had his baby, who's been trying to build a life with him." "I know that. You know that." "But Jay," she shook her head. "Jay's been waiting for the other shoe to drop since the day you said yes to marrying him." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the afternoon light shift across her kitchen table. "What are you going to do?" Linda asked eventually. "I don't know yet. But I'm not going to keep fighting for a marriage where I'm the only one who believes in it. That's fair. Is it though? Am I being unfair? Should I try harder to understand why he doubted me? Linda reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Emily, honey, there's a difference between understanding someone's insecurities and accepting their consequences. You can understand why Jay felt insecure without accepting that it was okay for him to treat you like a suspect in your own marriage. She was right. I could have compassion for Jay's fears without sacrificing my own dignity. I think I need to stay here a little longer, I said. As long as you need. That night, after Liam was asleep, I sat in the guest room and wrote in a journal I'd started keeping. I wrote about the dinner, about the DNA test, about the months of doubt and suspicion. But mostly, I wrote about the woman I wanted to be, the mother I wanted to be for Liam, the kind of partnership I wanted to have, whether it was with Jay or someone else entirely. I wrote about trust, about respect, about the difference between love and being loved well. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt hopeful about the future. Whatever that future looked like. 3 weeks later, it was Liam's first birthday. I'd been staying at Linda's the entire time, figuring out what I wanted my life to look like. Jay had visited Liam every few days, awkward conversations in Linda's living room, while our son played on the floor between us like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Jay had been going to counseling, individual therapy twice a week, trying to work through what his therapist called chronic insecurity and trust issues. He'd update me on his progress like he was filing a report, desperate to show me he was working on himself. Dr. Williams thinks my fear of abandonment stems from my father leaving when I was 12, he'd say. Or, we talked about how my anxiety manifests as suspicion in my relationships. I listened. I appreciated that he was getting help. But I also knew that insight didn't automatically equal change. We'd planned Liam's birthday party weeks before. Everything fell apart. A small gathering at my mother-in-law's house, family, and a few close friends. Nothing elaborate, just cake and presents, and pictures of our beautiful 1-year-old son. I almost canceled it. The idea of sitting in a room with Jay's entire family pretending everything was normal made my stomach turn. But Linda convinced me otherwise. Don't let their dysfunction rob Liam of celebrating his first birthday with people who love him, she said. You can handle a few hours, and honestly, it might be good for everyone to see where things stand. So I went. I put on a blue dress that made me feel strong, packed Liam's diaper bag, and drove to Joyce Henderson's house for what would probably be the most uncomfortable birthday party in family history. The living room was decorated with balloons and streamers. Joyce had made Liam's cake herself. A chocolate sheet cake with white frosting, and "Happy First Birthday, Liam," written in blue icing. There was a pile of wrapped presents on the coffee table. Jay was already there when I arrived, standing awkwardly by the fireplace, like he wasn't sure where he belonged in his own mother's house. Laura was there too, sitting on the couch next to Mark, both of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Emily, Joyce hugged me at the door. Oh, I'm so glad you came, and look at this handsome birthday boy. She took Liam from my arms and started fussing over him, talking in that high-pitched voice people use with babies. For a moment it felt almost normal, but then I caught Jay watching me from across the room, and the weight of everything unsaid settled back over us. Linda arrived with Uncle Tom a few minutes later, carrying an enormous wrapped box that probably contained some kind of riding toy Liam wouldn't be able to use for another year. How's the birthday boy? Tom asked, making faces at Liam until he giggled. We went through the motions, opened presents, sang "Happy Birthday," watched Liam destroy a piece of cake with his tiny hands, getting frosting everywhere. I took pictures on my phone, trying to capture the joy instead of the tension. But through it all, I could feel everyone watching Jay and me, waiting to see how we'd interact. Whether we'd sit together, whether we'd pretend everything was fine. We didn't sit together, and we didn't pretend. After Liam had opened all his presents and been thoroughly spoiled by his grandparents, Jay cleared his throat. Before Emily and Liam leave, he said, "I'd like to say something." The room went quiet. I was holding Liam on my lap, and I felt my body tense. "Jay," I said quietly, "you don't need to Yes, I do. He was standing in the middle of his mother's living room, looking at each person in turn. His hands were shaking slightly. A few weeks ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I doubted my wife. I doubted whether Liam was my son. I let fear and insecurity convince me that Emily was capable of lying about something fundamental. Laura was staring at the floor. Joyce's mouth had fallen open slightly. I was wrong. Not just factually wrong, though I was that too. I was wrong to let doubt poison our marriage. I was wrong to discuss my suspicions with other people, instead of talking to Emily directly. I was wrong to treat the woman I love like she was on trial. Jay's voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. Emily got a DNA test to prove what she should never have had to prove. Liam is my son. He's always been my son. And Emily is the most honest, loyal, incredible woman I've ever known. He looked directly at me, then his eyes full of tears. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want everyone in this room to know that Emily Henderson is a better person than I am. She's a better parent than I am. And if I lose her because of my own stupidity, it will be the greatest loss of my life. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of Liam babbling softly as he played with a toy truck. Jay turned to Laura. And I owe you an apology too, Laura. I let you influence me when I should have shut down your comments from the beginning. I made you complicit in something that damaged my marriage. That wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to Emily. Laura nodded but didn't speak. For once in her life, she seemed to be at a loss for words. Emily, Jay said, turning back to me. I know a public apology doesn't fix anything. I know words aren't enough, but I needed everyone who heard me doubt you to hear me acknowledge the truth. You're an amazing mother. You're an amazing wife, and I'm sorry I ever made you question that. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like vindication. After months of subtle accusations and whispered doubts, here was my husband publicly acknowledging that I'd been right all along. Instead, it just felt overdue, like getting an apology for something that should never have required one in the first place. Thank you, I said quietly. I appreciate you saying that. Jay looked like he wanted to say more, but I stood up, shifting Liam to my hip. We should probably head home, I said to the room in general. It's getting close to his nap time. Joyce hugged me goodbye, whispering, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. If I'd known what was happening. Linda walked me to my car, carrying Liam's new toys. How do you feel? She asked as I buckled Liam into his car seat. Tired, I said honestly, and sad. It's hard to celebrate when your marriage is falling apart. Is it falling apart, or is it just changing? I considered her question as I loaded the diaper bag into the trunk. I don't know yet. Jay's doing the work. He's trying to change, but I don't know if I can get past what happened. I don't know if I can trust him the way I used to. That's fair. Trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt slowly. If at all. Linda nodded. If at all. I drove back to Linda's house in silence, Liam falling asleep in the back seat. In the rearview mirror, I could see his little face relaxed in sleep cake, frosting still smeared on his cheek. 1 year old. In just 12 months, he'd gone from being a newborn who slept on my chest to a walking, babbling little person with his own personality. He had Jay's stubborn streak and my cautious nature. He loved music and hated green vegetables, and thought peekaboo was the funniest game ever invented. He was perfect. He was ours. And he'd never know that his father had once questioned whether he was really his. But he would know something else. He'd grow up knowing that his mother never backed down when she was right. He'd know that I stood up for myself, and for him, when we were both being questioned unfairly. He'd know that love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect and trust. And maybe, if I was lucky, he'd grow up to be the kind of man who would never put the woman he loved through what his father had put me through. That night, after Liam was asleep in his crib, I sat in Linda's guest room and made a decision. I wasn't ready to go home yet. Maybe I never would be, but I was ready to start building the life I wanted, whether that life included Jay or not, because I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. I didn't need anyone's permission to be happy. I didn't need anyone's validation to know my own worth. I just needed to trust myself enough to choose what I deserved. And I deserved so much more than a marriage built on doubt. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that love alone isn't enough. Emily learned that trust and respect aren't optional extras in a marriage. They're the foundation everything else is built on. What do you think? Should Emily give Jay another chance? Or was the damage too deep to repair? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to prove your innocence when you should have been trusted from the start? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like Emily's resonate with you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I share new family drama stories every week. Real situations, real emotions, and real lessons about standing up for yourself when it matters most. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.